to, these were on. I'm not quite started yet.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome members of council, staff, and anybody watching us through YouTube and press. I have a motion moved by Martin Lang, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be resolved that the council meeting of the Township of South Glengarry now be opened at 7:04 p.m. All in favor of the motion? Carried, thank you. I would ask everyone to please stand for the playing of our national anthem. Mrs. Lebrun. Okay, thank you, Ms. Lebrun. I have a motion moved by Lyle Warden, second by Sam Matinel. Be resolved that the council of the Township of South Glengarry approve the agenda. Any additions or deletions to the agenda, Madam Chair? Madam Clerk, I should say.
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Anything from the members of council? Not hearing none, so they would be as the agenda as circulated. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Not seeing none. Number 5 is the approval of the minutes of May 4th. I have a motion moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Lyle Warden. Be resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of South Glengarry held on May 4th, 2020 be adopted as circulated. Any questions or comments? Not hearing none. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Presentations and delegations, backyard chickens, Mrs. Haley.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council and members of the public. Can all of you see my presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. So I will get started. Council may recall I was asked to review our bylaw and to look at the opportunity to consider backyard chickens in various locations in our municipality. So a property owner had petitioned council to request to permit backyard chickens specifically in a residential zone located in an urban settlement area. And we proceeded to review the options. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Amanda Davidson. She's our building information officer. And Amanda certainly did a lot of work and background research in many municipalities, not only in Ontario, but across Canada to determine what their current regulations, requirements, and things like that were, which became a big part of our presentation. So I was very thankful for that. So currently in our zoning bylaw, known as zoning bylaw 3809, we prohibit the keeping and raising of any horse, bull, ox, sheep, goat, pig, or other cattle, or any poultry in any residential zone. The reason why we do that is because in the United Counties official plan, which is also the township's official plan, in that document, it states that no agricultural use can be permitted in an urban settlement area or residential or rural settlement area. In our rural zone, in the permitted uses for an agricultural use, an agricultural use can only be permitted on a property that is 2.5 hectares or greater in size, which equates to 6.14 acres. And then in the agricultural zone, which is in the prime agricultural area, which is land that's protected by the province simply because it has class 1, 2, and 3 classifications considered to be prime agricultural, you need to have a minimum of 20 hectares, which works out to, believe, 49.8 acres. So as I mentioned, to complete the presentation, a great deal of time went in to look at where chickens are permitted in our area and throughout the province. So in urban settlement areas, they're not permitted in South Dundas, North Glengarry, South Stormont. And South Stormont recently went through a process where they reviewed the opportunity for backyard chickens in urban areas and voted against it. North Stormont went through this, I believe, in early 2018, and they also voted against it. And currently North Dundas does not permit it. There are benefits though, and if we consider the benefits, you have access to local food. You're promoting education on food production, and oftentimes there's children involved with that. Many people tell us there's companionship in their chickens, and I believe they probably do get attached to their backyard chickens, and food quality and the possibility of reduction in waste. However, there are some issues that may arise with having backyard chickens in urban areas or settlement areas, and that could be noise, that could be predators or pests, some health concerns, odor complaints, disposal of manure, and if you have a dead chicken, and the animal welfare, and it does lead to some enforcement issues as well. Here's an example of municipalities that do not permit backyard chickens. You'll see in this list, this list does not include the United Counties of SD&G municipalities. It includes municipalities that are in various locations throughout the province, and some specifically in Eastern Ontario. And then we also, that continues. Again, some of these are from Eastern Ontario as well. And in a zoning bylaw where backyard hens are not permitted, chickens are often considered livestock. Livestock are part of an agricultural use, and agricultural uses are permitted in agricultural or rural zones. Municipalities that permit backyard chickens, there's quite a few of them as well. And you'll see here there's quite of an extensive list. They're in areas all throughout Ontario. And some of them are urban areas as well, like Niagara Falls, Kingston. So Toronto has a pilot project. So there's lots of examples also. And this list continues, and this page in the slideshow are examples that are outside of Ontario. So regulation of backyard chickens. Personal use only, not permitted to sell any hen products, eggs, manure, meat. Hens must be at least 4 months old. Roosters are prohibited, and that's been standard pretty much everywhere it's been reviewed. And some municipalities regulate a minimum of 2 to a maximum of 4 being most municipalities. And some municipalities require chicken coops to be locked from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. and no slaughtering on the property. And then you'll see in this area, permission from abutting property owners were required in Newmarket and Whitehorse, but that could be quite onerous for the municipality to regulate. And here's some examples of where chickens are actually licensed, being Brampton, Kingston, Kitchener. Quite a few of the urban areas actually had licensing requirements. Regulation of backyard chickens in terms of zoning. We noticed that chickens were only permitted on lot zone for single family dwellings. And here's an example of North Frontenac, Quinte West, and Norfolk. Some exclude multi-dwelling lots. I think the reason for excluding your semis or multi-dwelling lots is because you don't always have fences to divide the property lines for, let's say, a semi-detached or a row housing, and then the chickens could wander, or the lot lines are, there's no separation distances because the houses are connected, so they're very close together. We also have an example of, in some urban areas like Quinte West, and there are rural components to Quinte West as well, that they required a minimum lot size of 1 acre. So these are some examples of where registration is required, where you actually have to obtain a permit to have chickens, and some municipalities charge a permit fee. And some municipalities also regulate the location of the coops. So for example, it could range from a 1.2 to a 3 meters setback from any side lot line, so side or rear. In this case, there's an example of 0.6 to 1.2 from rear lot lines. 1.2 is most common. 3 meters from any abutting dwellings with windows or doors. 7.5 to 15 meters from a lot where a church, school, business is located. And you can see in Aurelia, Caledon, and Severn, they only allow chickens in the rear yard. So I think this presentation can demonstrate a variety of municipalities that regulate the location of the coops and setbacks. Also, we found that a maximum of 10 square meters of floor area was common. Also 0.37 square meters per coop, or 0.93 square meters per run outdoor enclosure per hen. And then here's an example of nothing smaller than 4 square meters. Again, that's just to give council an example of what some municipalities require and regulate. A majority of cases where backyard chickens are permitted in highly urban areas, mostly the Greater Toronto Area and Greater Golden Horseshoe, which are heavily regulated in terms of lot size, dwelling type. They need to be licensed, and there were maximum numbers. So sometimes we do hear from the public and they'll say, oh, well, Toronto allows it. And they do, but you have to meet a very specific criteria. You'll find when you do research of municipal bylaws, relatively little information is available for backyard chickens in rural townships. That's because they're not that common in urban areas and rural townships. And then another limitation would be the enforcement, just to be able to monitor if you choose to have licensing, numbers of chickens or maximum number of chickens, location and size of coops, things like that. So just to speak to council about complaints. So in preparing this presentation, we had received 16 complaints from people that were complaining about their neighbors that would currently have chickens that do not conform to the bylaw. And we know they're out there. I mean, we certainly don't pay staff to drive around and look for chickens that don't comply. And when we do receive a complaint, we address the complaint. And we have received 2 complaints from individuals complaining that they cannot have chickens because they would like to have chickens, and these would be specifically in a settlement area. However, these numbers have changed quite drastically just in the last several days, and I think our council is aware of that as well. We've had a number of complaints that have come in literally since last Thursday regarding an issue in one of our settlement areas because of some backyard chickens that aren't legal and are causing some rodent issues in that community. So this slide is not up to date given that situation. So recommendations in moving forward with council. So if council were to consider having chickens, what we would recommend is that chickens would be permitted on developed properties in the rural and agricultural zones, regardless of the size of lots. So an example that I've provided to you is Beaverbrook Road. An example could be a 0.75 acre lot with a single family home. And the reason why I gave Beaverbrook Road as an example is because it's located in a rural zone. Your setbacks for your dwellings to your lot lines and your accessory, your dwellings to your lot lines are much larger than what you would see in an urban settlement area. And if you have a 0.75 acre lot, or let's say a 2 acre lot, you're probably not negatively impacting your neighbor with having a handful of chickens. We don't recommend the requiring of licensing or registration of the chickens, as this creates an increased workload for bylaw enforcement that may not be necessary if you contain it to the rural and agricultural areas. We do recommend that you permit chickens on properties with single-family homes only. Simply as I stated, if you have a semi-detached, it often could look like a shared backyard, not you know, your property lines are invisible. You may have fences in some areas you may not. And especially if you're in a property with a fourplex where you do have common space, then we certainly would not recommend that. We would also recommend to council that if they were considering allowing chickens in settlement areas or subdivisions, that you do allow for a maximum, just so that the number of chickens, the odor, the insects, the look of it or the cleanliness of it just doesn't get out of control. And we recommend that there would be no max in a rural or agricultural area. In regards to roosters, we certainly do not recommend any roosters to be permitted in a rural area, or excuse me, in an urban area. But if they were to be permitted in a rural and agricultural area, that they would have to meet the current bylaw requirements. So for an example of that is, if you're currently in the agricultural zone, you would need a minimum of 20 hectares, which is 49.8 acres. Or if you're in the rural zone, you would need a minimum of 2.5 hectares, which is 6.14 acres. And we would also recommend that the pen size be less than, or the coop size be less than 10 square meters. And the reason for that is simply to ensure that the proponents do not need a building permit, because anything over 10 square meters under the Ontario Building Code is, and that's considered a structure, would trigger a permit. And that just makes it more onerous for individuals. And our current setback for accessory structures in an urban settlement area, subdivisions, or even in rural areas for residential properties is only 1.2 meters. So in order to move forward, we do require direction of council. And my questions to council this evening, and if I can get that direction, would help me then determine how I'm going to write an amending bylaw for the future. So my questions would be, do you want chickens in the villages? And when I mean villages, I mean settlement areas. That could include subdivisions as well. And do you want chickens in villages that have private services, being a well, where it could potentially contaminate the groundwater? And I have in brackets here, keep in mind that a minor variance can be applied for at any time. And the reason why I've highlighted that in my presentation is, as you are aware, the Ontario Planning Act allows for minor variances to be applied for to either seek relief from setbacks or seek permissions. So let's say if council did allow chickens to be in a settlement area and you capped it at 5, and we had a property owner come forward and they really wanted to have 10 chickens or 7 chickens, then they could apply for the minor variance to increase that number subject to approval of the Committee of Adjustment. Or if they wanted their coop to be bigger than the 10 square meters or closer to a property line, they could also apply for those reliefs as well. And so the next steps. So I am hoping to receive some verbal direction this evening from council, and I'm hoping that there will be a consensus so I understand how to move forward. Depending on how I'm moving forward, I believe there'll be components of our bylaw that will need to be rewritten. And that could be whether we allow them in settlement areas or not, or let's say if we allow them in rural areas regardless of the size, then I would also have to rewrite sections of our bylaw for that. I may have to rewrite the agricultural use definition because right now chickens are part of a livestock. So if we do allow them in settlement areas, we remove the chickens from the livestock zone definition and create a new definition, and that allows us then to conform to the official plan. Once I rewrite the sections of the bylaw, we then notify the public with the notice in the newspaper and on our website indicating that we're completing a housekeeping amendment. And we provide or schedule a public meeting, and the notice would include the public meeting date and time. We then would hold a public meeting. And once we receive feedback from the public, we then bring an amending bylaw to council for approval, also considering the public comments. And whatever council's decision is, it is subject to a 20-day appeal period, meaning that any member of the public can appeal the decision regardless if it was a positive or negative decision. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that that council may have, and I look forward to any direction that you can give me this evening if possible. If there's not a consensus and if council needs more time, that's fine as well. I just need to know how to move forward. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Haley, for your presentation. Just to inform council, I dropped off 2 bylaw complaint forms on Veronica's desk this evening in regards to that same issue. I had two people call me and ask me if I'd be able to pick up the forms and drop them off at the township office, so I did that today. So I will open it up to members of council for any comments or questions. I think Councillor McDonnell, you had your hand up.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I personally am not in favor of having chickens in urban settlement areas. I'm very familiar with the agricultural use of them. And when chickens aren't managed properly, it causes a lot of issues, be it rodents or just the disposal of manure. I know I had, in the past, I've looked at different farming operations where they have limited space, and the nutrient management plans that have to be done for that and the hoops that have to be jumped through are very onerous. The paperwork is through OMAFRA it's very thorough. And I can't see somebody with 5 chickens accumulating manure on their property over the year. I can't see a proper way to dispose of it. And it's either going to wind up in our garbage or they're going to be making piles in their backyard. And I don't think that's fair to any neighbors. I think there's a lot of space in this municipality for chickens outside of urban settlement areas. I'm a firm believer that if you want chickens, you should be outside of the urban settlement area. If you're in the urban settlement area, you're there because you either don't want to deal with the smell that farming practices cause, mud on the roads, things such as that, but you're willing to give up the space and the regular lot size you would get out in the countryside. So I think there's a place for them, and it's not in the village.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Lang, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I'm going to agree with Mr. McDonnell as far as settlement areas. I do think that to give Ms. Haley some direction, I do think it would be nice if we could make anything outside of settlement areas consistent, that it doesn't have to be 20 hectares or 2.5 hectares. So I would just say generally outside of the settlement areas, I'd be fine with it. And inside the settlement areas, I would say I'm against it. I think it's just going to set us up for a lot of, like, how are we going to police this? We can't just let it go wide open. So we'd have to have some rules. We're going to write all these rules. And then you have to people go around and check the rules and respond to complaints. And I think it's just going to be a lot of extra work for us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lang. Any other comments or questions for Deputy Mayor Warden?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Although I would have liked to have seen some sort of a pilot project with specific guidelines. It's evident that, well, I mean, we all seen the video from Friday evening. It was disturbing. And so that to me is what happens when there is no guidelines and there is no parameters for such a thing. That being said, there seems to be consensus on council that there's no wish to have them in the urban area. So I would be fine with that being permitted outside, as Councillor Lang said, you know, generalize it, don't put restrictions to certain effects. And if anybody within the urban settlement in the future wishes to want chickens, Ms. Haley, you indicated that they would be able to apply for a minor variance, and if they were able to demonstrate that they're able to manage them and the committee of adjustment at that time chose to permit it, it's a possibility. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be a possibility only if I change the definition of the agricultural use and then add a general provision that would speak to it. And if council wants to do that and provide that flexibility in the plan, I can. If depending on my direction this evening, I could write it in a way that they're only permitted in the rural and agricultural areas, regardless of the lot size, and change the definition for that.
Thank you. May I have a subsequent, Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to say, I feel it's very unfortunate that responsible residents are being, unfortunately, this video really put a negative spin on this. I was speaking with another member of council the other day, and it was kind of my opinion that they were kind of in favor of this, but that clearly isn't the case this evening. So I feel like that video has put a real negative spin on, and I kind of feel that while it was disturbing, I feel like if people are given parameters, I think that, anyways, it's just unfortunate, but I'll move on.
Okay, thank you. Just got a very quick comment. I would be in favor in regards to what Councillor Lang was talking about and Councillor McDonnell, and I have no interest in regards to having an opportunity for minor variances in the urban settlement areas. So that's my opinion, but I think Councillor McDonnell, then Councillor Jaworski.
Oh,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess my comment, I wasn't going to reference the video that was posted over the weekend. This was my stance before the video, but I'm just in general, I guess, in regards to the video, farms often get a bad rap of there's rats running rampant on every livestock farm. And I'll just, from what I made a stop there and spoke with the property owner for an hour, and the amount of rats I saw there, I've never seen in my entire life on my own farm. And if there was an agricultural inspector that came into a farm that even had one rat, they would be, the health and safety codes and everything else associated with it, you'd be shut down in 5 minutes. It's not how you produce food, and I wouldn't want to eat one egg coming out of there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, I was one to be more open to this idea. I mean, I fully acknowledge that there was a video that's been circulated that I think really shows an extreme situation, sadly, and it's really put this in a very poor light. I mean, I think Ms. Haley did an excellent job detailing like the good points of having chickens, and I think through the discussion it's clear that any kind of animal that you're going to have on your property, they have to be managed properly, and that there are issues when there aren't guidelines. And I ideally would have liked to have seen a pilot, including in the urban settlement areas. I mean, perhaps, a limited pilot, we would have to look at which area, but, it's kind of perplexing to me how in, very urban areas like the GTA, that they're able to make programs like this work. And, again, it has to be properly managed and guidelines have to be followed. But, we often talk of the divide between agriculture and folks who are not exposed to agriculture. And I feel that, when it's done properly, this is something that brings those communities closer together, having people understand what it's like to have a small number of livestock and to benefit from them. But that being said, certainly I know with COVID-19, certainly with the circle of people that I'm connected with through social media, I know there's lots of folks in the rural lands who don't have large lots, but who have now built coops and have chickens, and it's sort of like their COVID-19 project. So absolutely, I would want us to extend, allow folks to have chickens in the rural lands on, smaller lots than what are technically allowed today. And I still, I realize I'm in the minority and it won't move forward, but I would still like to have a pilot to have chickens with strong guidelines for urban settlement areas. And I don't like when the reason for not doing something is because it's complicated. I don't, that's not a reason. I like to think that we can be innovative and creative. So, but I realize I'm in the minority tonight.
Okay, thanks very much. Is there any other comments? Not seeing none. Joanne, do you have enough information in regards to what council, I guess, is the majority of council is looking for at this present time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to summarize, I think it's clear that all of council is in favor in relaxing the rules in terms of minimum lot areas for chickens in the rural and agricultural zones.
Correct.
And we can certainly do that. You're not in favor, or not all of you are in favor in permitting them in settlement areas, and which would also include plans of subdivisions.
Right.
So what will happen as I explain the next steps moving forward, we'll be doing the housekeeping amendment, and council will have the opportunity to do a few readings to ensure that you're pleased with how the authoring of these new components of our bylaw is, and that we receive your feedback and support before we bring it to the third and final reading. But I would write it first, a public meeting would happen. We would get your feedback in the public meeting as well as the public. And then you'd have an opportunity for first and second reading, or even first reading, then second and third. So there'll be lots of opportunity to work with you to ensure you're satisfied with the changes. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We look forward to your report coming forward in the near future or in the future. Thank you. And we'll move to B is Community Improvement Plan Amendments. Mrs. Haley.
Okay. So one moment, please, Mr. Mayor. I just need to get out of this presentation and share my screen to share a new presentation. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so our next presentation this evening is about our community improvement plan and possible amendments in moving forward. So we currently have a community improvement plan, and that plan is a tool that municipalities can use in order to offer grants, grant programs and loans to assist local residents and businesses. Section 28 of the Planning Act gives municipalities enabling policies in their official plan that ability to prepare for community improvement plans. And our official plan has those policies. So why do we implement a CIP, and why did council approve one? It was to encourage revitalization and to stimulate development in the local economy. So as I mentioned, we currently have a community improvement plan. And our CIP was approved on September 4th, 2018, which also included the United Counties of SD&G Regional Incentive Program. Since the approval, we have processed and funded 19 applications, granting $39,197.17 for facade improvements, signage, paving of parking lots, and landscaping. And this equates to over $78,000 being spent on community improvements. All of those applications were in the Lancaster community improvement area. And why I say it equates to over 78% is because we only fund a certain percentage of each project. Therefore, dollars are required to be committed by the property owners, the applicants themselves. So goals for the community improvement plan is to encourage redevelopment and improvement to attract people and business in South Glengarry, improve the pedestrian experience in Main Street areas of South Glengarry, and promote public investment in streetscapes and core commercial areas in South Glengarry. So our approved community improvement plan had phases. So phase 1 was South Lancaster, Green Valley, Williamstown, and Martintown, both residential and commercial structures fronting on the main streets. In the maps that are included on this plan, it shows what the settlement areas are. And I mentioned that our approvals were in Lancaster, and I need to correct saying that they were in Lancaster and South Lancaster, so not just Lancaster, I apologize. Our phase 2, which is now in effect, you'll see it comes into effect in 2020 to 2022, is Glen Norman, North Lancaster, and Baynesville, both residential and commercial structures fronting on the main streets, and in Glen Walter is commercial only. And phase 3 is public art in visible locations and possible internal upgrades within both residential, commercial structures fronting on the main streets. And that's for 2022 and 2024. The reason why that is included to be in phase 3 is because typically municipalities want a majority of their funds to go to exterior upgrades that are visible by the community and guests coming into the community, and not always wanting to have it on internal upgrades. However, in our CIP, there are 7 different funding programs that our township offers. And these eligible projects can include a planning and design grant program. So for example, if you needed to obtain a graphic artist to maybe come up with a rendering to determine how you want your property to look or be developed. If you needed to apply for a building permit, you could have a percentage of your costs covered, or any hiring a certified designer under the Ontario Building Code could be included in that program as well. Building improvements is kind of obvious. That would be, examples would be facade, window replacement, roof repairs on visible locations of the structure. Commercial signage, that speaks for itself. Landscaping, the only thing landscaping does not include are annual plants that would die, but we certainly would fund the creating of, let's say, flower boxes. As I mentioned, paving. You could have patio stones or interlocking brick for your sidewalks, things like that. Public art speaks for itself. Accessibility would be to create spaces to be more accessible in the commercial areas. And then interior improvements are for commercial zones. They're loans only, and they would be primarily for accessibility, current building code, barrier-free design standards, and they should also address health and safety. So really making those commercial spaces more accessible and safer for the patrons. So currently, our program, when it provides the example of the funds that we provide. So planning and design programs would be a one-time grant of 50% to a maximum of $1,500. Your building improvements, 50% to a maximum of $5,000 for your principal facade, and 50% to a maximum of $2,500 for your secondary facade, to a total of $7,500. A typical example of a secondary facade would be a building on a corner lot, where the front of that building that faces the main street would be the principal, and the side of that structure would be the secondary. For signage and commercial awnings, you have a maximum of 50% matching grant to a maximum of $2,000, with a minimum cost of $750, and that's because you're not going to fund a really small sign. And then awnings would be a 50% matching grant to a maximum of $2,500. Landscaping is 50% to a maximum of $2,000. Accessibility in the commercial zone is a one-time grant of 50% to a maximum of $5,000 to principal facade to provide access to buildings, 50% to a maximum of $2,500. And public art would be 50% to a maximum of $1,000 for window displays and vacant storefronts, and 50% to a maximum of $2,000 for murals, outdoor sculptures, and interpretive signage. Interior improvements, as I mentioned, are loans only. They're an interest-free loan up to a maximum of $10,000 with a minimum loan of $2,000. When we created the Community Improvement Plan, Council also created a Community Improvement Advisory Committee known as CPAC. Our committee has met on a few occasions to review and make recommendations to Council to approve applications. As I mentioned, we funded 19 applications to date, so the committee would have reviewed all of those applications and made a recommendation. During these meetings, we also discussed improvements that could be made to the Community Improvement Plan itself. And it was primarily to increase the number of applications being filed throughout our municipality, as well as to invest more dollars in the community for improvement. So here's an example of some of the feedback we received from both members of the Community Improvement Advisory Committee, as well as our members of council. So we heard that they would like to eliminate phasing and make the grants available to all locations throughout the municipality and not worry about the years assigned in the original plan for the phases. The possibility of increasing the grant amounts for each program to allow applicants to receive more funding. to require applicants to prepare testimonials once a project is complete. And to me, that's a very easy one to achieve because that does not need to be outlined in the plan itself. Also, another recommendation was to put more focus on grants for accessibility improvements to allow for continuous application intake. And you'll see now in brackets that says now implemented. And why that's been implemented is simply because you don't need to include that in the plan and it doesn't need formal approval. Another example is to increase accessibility, to possibly cap it to 10K and fund 70% of the project as opposed to 50% and a much lower amount. And when funding paving of commercial parking lots, ensuring that they meet the Accessibilities of Ontario Disabilities Act standards to ensure that they are accessible spaces. You'll see in this slide that I provided to council an example of what our neighboring municipalities provide. I'm not going to read every component. I would like to highlight the first two columns. The first one is South Glengarry, of course. The second one is North Glengarry. And council may recall when we did this, we chose to work with North Glengarry and use the same values to ensure that we were not working differently from each other and that we were consistent. North Glengarry has had a very successful CIP program, and we learned a lot from them. Their program's been in place for a few years longer than ours, and we felt it would be good to be consistent between the two communities so we weren't compared to negatively. However, that can change. That's entirely council's decision. And then when you look at South Stormont, there are some categories that they don't fall in, that they don't fund that we do. And there's a big component of South Stormont's community improvement plan that focuses on brownfield development. And that's something that we currently don't do. And we don't fund environmental studies and things like that, which they do. And then you'll also see some differences in North Dundas and South Dundas to us. And you'll see that there's some components or programs that they don't fund either. But one thing to point out is our maximum project costs, our maximum amounts to fund are very similar amongst SD&G. So if council's considering increasing the maximums, as I mentioned, you certainly can do it. It's your decision. But I just wanted to share with you what the other municipalities do. So next steps in the process. So right now we're at obtaining feedback from council to possibly consider to amend our current CIP. If council provides me the direction to amend it and to include some of the recommendations we made this evening and possibly even give me more recommendations, I would rewrite the community improvement plan. And the Planning Act requires us to hold a formal public meeting. And that's the reason for that is to give members of the community the opportunity to provide feedback to ensure that that plan is going to work for our community. We then submit the amended community improvement plan to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I was recently speaking with them and they said they needed a few weeks and they do need to review an amending document, but they were happy to do so and help us. And then I would bring it back to council for first and second reading, and then final reading and approval by council. And that has to follow a 20-day appeal period, as that is required by the Ontario Planning Act. And then once that's over, we would then implement the new and the amended CIP. So the direction of council that I'm looking for this evening, and this may be difficult for you to give me all your direction this evening, and you may want to take some time to think about it, and that's fine too. Do we want to increase the maximum funds for each program? Do we want to eliminate the phasing so that we just open up the CIP to all areas and components that are currently in the plan? Do we want to increase the accessibility funds and improve the accessibility program portion? Do we want to review paving of parking lots to ensure that they do meet accessible standards? And requiring testimonials. I have in brackets here, it does not need to be in the CIP document, and for that matter, it doesn't need to be directed by council. But I will tell you that we had members of our committee that our committee was very passionate about this, and as staff, we believe this would be a good idea to complete, and it might encourage other applicants to file if they see some successful projects and people being very excited about the funds that they have received to achieve their goals on their sites. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if you're willing to give me direction this evening, that would be great. Or if you need more time, that's fine too, but I've got my notes ready.
Okay, thanks very much for your staff report. Deputy Mayor Warden.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Joanne, for this report. As you know, I'm on that committee, and I feel strongly about it. I personally would like to see the no cutoff times, like open-ended applications. I'd like to open it up to the rest of the municipality with the money budgeted that we have. And I would also be in favor of increasing the amount for accessibility to a cap of, say, 10,000 and pay up to 70% of the projects. I think that we need to show our community that we are trying to be proactive as possible with the legislation that's coming down the pipeline. I also feel that opening it up to the rest of the municipality will help potentially spur some economic development in this hard time. If people have been saving up, they potentially may take advantage of the grants, and it may spur work for our local tradespeople. So I'm fully in favor of pretty well everything that was proposed on that sheet. I think this is a great program, and I think by making these changes, it'll make it that much better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McDonnell, and then Councillor Jaworski.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Joanna. I, as well as the Deputy Mayor, sit on that, and I actually chair that committee. I'd agree with the Deputy Mayor as far as there's pretty well, I don't think there's one on there that I disagree with. I'd like to eliminate the phasing and see it open up to the rest of the municipality. As Deputy Mayor Warden said, it could spark some I guess some people spending money with our local contractors. The accessibility one, absolutely. I think there's a lot of businesses that aren't even aware of what they're going to have to comply to in the next couple of years. And there's just a few that come to mind in the village of Lancaster alone that would have to do significant renovations to be able to continue under those standards. Now, we don't know with COVID if that'll be pushed off or not, but it will. There'll be a lot of money spent just on becoming compliant with accessibility. The only thing I do have an issue with that we are currently funding, and I don't know if it's the appetite of council to look at it, and I know it was mixed on the committee side. We are currently, anybody who falls in this, we are paying part of paving costs for people's residential laneways. I would rather put more money to businesses to get them to pave. Whether it's, a couple of different businesses come to mind as well, still on gravel parking lots. I would rather put more money to them and stop funding residential paving. I mean, for the ones who have gotten it already, it was luck of the draw, but I don't see why we should be paving resident laneways as opposed to businesses.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the different items, thank you, Ms. Haley, for your presentation. I think what Deputy Mayor Warden put forward in terms of encouraging more work towards meeting accessibility standards, I think that's a really excellent thing. I think it helps the businesses meet those requirements that will be fairly expensive to put in, and also it supports our residents who do have mobility challenges. So I think it's really a positive thing all around. I agree. We should eliminate phasing. I think we want, the important thing is to keep interest in the program, and I think opening it up wider. I think that's throughout the township. I think that's an important thing to do now. The point was made about helping spur some work as we come out of the COVID-19 restrictions. I think that is also an excellent idea. Just because I have the opportunity, because Councillor McDonnell went before me, with regards to the paving, my understanding of the purpose of the program is there's a certain element of beautifying our main streets, and so we are doing some work on private residences, in terms of windows, in terms of, that sort of thing. So I don't know if, saying, well, not for paving specifically to residences, I don't know if that's really consistent with the rest of the goals of the program. But certainly when it comes to paving of commercial sites, I think we really should be encouraging those sites to be doing it to accessibility standards.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I'll keep it short. I'm in agreement as well with, everybody seems to be pretty well on track. The paving, I'm okay with private residents as well as on main streets. And thanks for the presentation, Joanna. Thanks for the 2 members that sit on the committee.
Okay, thank you. And just a question, I guess, or show of hands from members of council, the dollar amounts that we're contributing to each project, are we satisfied with those numbers? I know we look at South Stormont, for an example, that they're not quite double of what we are, but they're probably another third of what we are. So I'm just wondering if our numbers are fair. $2,000 to pave a portion of a parking lot, is that enough, or should we be increasing that? Deputy Mayor Warden?
Yeah, I think in respect to the numbers that we have, I think we're consistent with North Glengarry. The only thing I would be in favor of altering would be increasing the accessibility portion and the percentage. So instead of 50%, go to 70 and a maximum of 10,000. The rest of it, Mr. Mayor, I think it would allow more applicants to achieve funding and dispersing the funds to a wider area.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's fair. I just wanted to make sure that we just had that quick discussion. Councillor McDonnell, please.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd agree with Deputy Mayor Warden. I think just for now, anyways, I would keep the rest of the numbers where they are, with the exception of the accessibility program. If we see that we still are sitting on funds at the end of the day in future years, we can then readdress some of those numbers. I mean, one that comes to mind that I would maybe consider would be signage and awnings. As far as the cost of awnings is high, and signage that we have seen come through the committee, although very nice, it is still either tin signs or plastic. So I that would be the only one I would consider upping. You might see more, I guess, creative and higher end signs coming out of it. But for now, I would leave it where it is, and let's address the rest of the township and see where we sit with funds at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like some clarification when what Deputy Mayor Warden is suggesting. So is that the line that we currently do? We're doing 50% up to a maximum of $1,500, and you're proposing 70% of 10,000? Or am I missing?
I think it's 5,000, but I'll get correction.
Up to 5,000, if I am correct, Ms. Haley. I believe it's 50% up to 5,000. I'd like to see it increased to 70% up to a maximum of 10,000. So we're increasing the amount that we'll grant plus the percentage of the project.
Okay. So that's the building improvement line. I was just focused on the accessibility line. So maybe Ms. Haley, if you could clarify what's the difference.
So thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The line that I believe that our deputy mayor is speaking to, as well as Councillor McDonnell, and they both sit on the committee, is the line called accessibility in commercial zones and brackets. So not the building improvement one, but it would be the 5th program listed on slide number 11, I believe.
Yep.
And currently it's one-time grant, 50% to a maximum of 5 to the principal facade, and 50% to a maximum of 2,500 for the secondary facade.
Sorry, I was looking at the chart, and I think, sorry, the chart is not the same as the.
I see. May I interject, Mr. Mayor? I see where Councillor Jaworski is speaking to.
Oh,
it's the commercial only. Yes, that is the one where I would like to see it increased to a maximum of 70%, up to 10,000, where it's at 50 of 1,500.
Okay.
That is the one I was referring to. Thank you, Councillor Jaworski.
Okay, any other comments or questions, Councillor Jaworski?
No, so we're talking about the accessibility line that we're doing 50% to 5,000, and now we're suggesting going 70% to 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay. Okay, thank you. Joanne, I think you have enough clarification in regards to what council is looking for in the CIP report?
I do, Mr. Mayor. So it's very clear that we would increase the accessibility components, eliminate the phasing, and keep the caps as status quo with the exception of accessibility. And as Councillor McDonnell said, we can change it at any time. As you can see, that is going to take a few months to go through the process simply because of the timelines of the Planning Act, but that is our right, or your right, to make those changes. So thank you very much for that direction.
Okay, thank you. That is the wish of council. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to new business. Staff reports, removal of holding symbol from the floodplain, excuse me, holding zone, Senecal property. Mrs. Haley.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a Planning Act application similar to a zoning amendment where we would remove the holding symbol from a subject property. The property that we're speaking about this evening is located at part of lots 35 and 36 concession 1, being part 2 on reference plan 14R872 in the former township of Lancaster, now in South Glengarry, also known as 2500 Old Montreal Road in South Lancaster. So the purpose of this holding zone was to require the owner of the subject property to provide necessary information to both the Raisin Region Conservation Authority and the township to prove that the portion proposed to be redeveloped on the subject property is above the 1 in 100 year floodplain. The applicant retained a professional Ontario land surveyor to complete a topographical survey and was able to prove the area where the existing house is above the floodplain. And council is aware that the applicant has also gone through a minor variance process to reduce the watercourse setback on the south and east sides. And the next step in the process would be to remove the holding this evening. And you'll see on the map that's provided in the bylaw, it's only in a very specific area on that lot, simply because that matches the survey where the area is above the 1 in 100 year floodplain. And as I mentioned in my staff report, that the RCA supports the removal of holding, and an Ontario regulation permit is required. And I am aware that the applicant is working with the Conservation Authority to satisfy all of those requirements. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but my recommendation is to approve the bylaw.
Sorry, any comments or questions from members of council? Not seeing none. I have a motion moved by Sam McDonnell, second by Martin Lang. Be resolved that staff report 63-2020 be received and that bylaw 27-20, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 38-09, the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the township of South Glengarry, site specific to south parts of lots 26, concession 1, part 2 on reference plan 14R-4332 in the former township of Lancaster, now in the township of South Glengarry, county of Glengarry, to remove the holding symbol to permit the development of the subject area, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this 19th day of May 2020. There's no other comments or questions. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. The next on the staff reports is township signage policy. My understanding is Megan Bingley will be doing that one. Megan?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, and members of the public. Back in February of 2019, council supported the need for a municipal signage policy. The signage policy is being created to establish a consistent message and brand that will help improve the visitor experience and promote local businesses and attractions throughout South Glengarry. Throughout discussion, it was discussed that the sign policy would include South Glengarry's slogan, Ontario's Celtic Heartland, and the county's of SDG slogan, Where Ontario Began. A request for quotation was issued, and the successful business was Sign It, who's owned by Noella Cotton. So Noella has created 2 sign designs for review, and I might be able to share them on my screen. Just one moment. There you go. Are you able to see that?
No.
No?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, it's good. Okay. So option 1 includes the Ontario's Celtic Heartland written in the official font of the township. And option 2 has Ontario's Celtic Heartland in a non-cursive font. So following the direction of council, once we choose a preferred option, we will return with a draft signage policy for first and second reading. So I'd like to turn it to council now for discussion in regards to the different options that we currently have.
Okay, thank you. Megan, I guess the question I have, I've had people questioning in regards to the signage. They look beautiful, don't get me wrong. They're just wondering why South Glengarry is not on any of them, just so people know they're in South Lancaster in the township of South Glengarry, for example.
I did have
I know it takes a lot of room, but
I did have this discussion with Joanne. I was onboarded just over 3 months ago, so I wasn't here for previous discussions. So Joanne will help me out with this question.
Sure.
Thank you,
Megan, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you will recall in November when Noella Cottenham from Sign It came and presented the options to council. And that was the discussion and direction of council at that time, because they were parking signs, community signage, park signage. It's my recollection that at that time, because all these signs would be located within the community boundaries, council did not require it to say South Glengarry. However, I too have had a couple members of council speak to me about it and received comments from members of the public. And if you have changed your mind or didn't understand that or want to see it added to the sign, that would not be an issue at all. We could go back to Ms. Cottenham and ask her to include that as well and come up with different options if council wishes. But that was part of the presentation in November.
okay, thank you. I guess I'll go to Deputy Mayor Warden and Councillor Jaworski, but I'll ask at the same time if you can comment if you want South Glengarry on the signs or not at the same time, please. Deputy Mayor Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the signs are designed lovely. I think they're great. I think they will allow for each community to kind of have their own stamp per se, if you will. I'm on the fence. I think they're nice. I prefer the one on the left that has the Ontario Celtic Heartland in the same font that we have on our standalone South Glengarry logo. So I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. If that's such a thing, maybe there's a place that we could add it at the bottom, because I do like the font. I do think that it represents our community. And I think maybe if we were able to add above where Ontario began, the South Glengarry or something like that. So.
Okay, so you're in favor of option 1, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Jaworski, then Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Bingley, for your presentation. You know, to be honest, I didn't recall that at that meeting. I don't recall at that other meeting that we said we wouldn't have South Glengarry. And it could be that I misinterpreted. I think perhaps I associated that Ontario's Celtic Heartland, that piece came with the South Glengarry, like what we have in our logo on our business cards. Now that might have been my mistake, but I think, I mean, as it stands, having the two mottos or taglines, one from South Glengarry, one from the counties, without any context of what they are, I think to me, it looks confusing. It looks like, well, which one are you? Are you the Celtic Heartland, or are you where we began? So I'll say that there. And I think because I understand that these will be the same in every hamlet, but I think it's still important to, I mean, people don't know if this is more for, I think, you know, beautification very much for people who are coming to the township. I mean, obviously for residents to have pride, but also for people who are visiting us. I think it's important to remind them that, you know, this is still South Glengarry, and it's not evident just that the fact that the signs look similar, that they're still in the same place. So I would like to have South Glengarry integrated on the sign with, I mean, I don't know if it, I mean, I'd leave that up to, I don't have any skill in that at all. So I'd leave that up to someone else, but I think it should say South Glengarry. And like, I'll repeat, the two taglines, it's confusing to me, again, because there's no context. I mean, when you have where Ontario began, it's normally, it comes with, the counties. We know that it's related to the counties. So in terms of font, I prefer to keep the font consistent to what we have already.
Okay, thank you. I agree. I kind of agree with Councillor Jaworski in regards to, I'm just wondering, Joanne, signs in other municipalities that are township signs, do they have where Ontario began, or should we leave that as on the county signs, I guess is my question.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, as you are aware, because I believe you were part of those initial discussions, when the United Counties heard that we were looking at creating a policy for community signage, they thought it would be a great opportunity to ask for their tagline to be included. The counties aren't funding any of the signs. So what we did was then we agreed that we would, and this happened outside of council, by the way. So if there's members of our council that are surprised by this came from the United Counties administration through our mayor, and then I met with them, and I believe our deputy mayor was aware of as well. And I met with them to say, okay, let's bring it to our designer to see what we can do. We have not made a commitment as of yet to the United Counties that we would definitely include it. So this is why we're back before council to say, what do you like and don't like? This is your chance to be as critical as possible to get what you want at the end of the day, and that we're not modifying signs constantly, so that we can have consistency for the next several years in working with our community or our parks or parking and things like that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm just wondering if it's going to be too much on a sign. I mean, you got Ontario's Celtic Heartland, you got South Lancaster, then you're adding South Glengarry, and then at the bottom is where Ontario began. So maybe they can redesign the same sign or a similar sign with one with where Ontario began and one without, with adding South Glengarry in both signs, if that's possible.
I hope Megan got that. If not, can you repeat it?
Yes, I definitely got it through
Okay,
you, Mr.
good.
Mayor. I don't think that will be an issue. I'll chat with Mrs. Cottonham after council tomorrow.
Signs do look beautiful, but I'm muted. What? No? Okay. So apologize for us, please, because the signs do look beautiful, but I mean, if it's an opportunity, we want to make sure we do them right. And if it's the suggestion of council that we have South Glengarry on there, then let's redesign them to see what it looks like with the 4 items on there, or just down to 3, so we can make a decision at that point. Any other comments or questions from members of council? Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll agree with so far with the majority of council. I do like the signs; they look very nice. I'll be honest, my understanding, and I think it's a little unclear when you look at the pictures. It was to my knowledge that we were going to do where the Ontario's Celtic Heartland is now was going to be South Glengarry. It was going to be then in smaller font, then South Lancaster, and then underneath, because it's not like we do very many of these signs where they are Mason tenant jointed at the bottom where that Ontario began. I was under the impression that it was going to be individual bars that we stuck at the bottom. It was going to say Glengarry County, Ontario's Celtic Heartland, and then counties SDG where Ontario began. I kind of saw it as a blocked, kind of individually added. I was under the impression the counties were going to pay for their signage on it, and the reason was they wanted, I guess, more or less recognition for the roads they maintain, was kind of the thought process that I had. I saw South Glengarry, the hamlet, and then individual bars added to the 8x8 posts that we have, because there aren't going to be very many where you're going to be able to put a little plaque like that on. Actually, I think with the only ones you'll be able to do that on are maybe in Williamstown. But I know Martintown, Lancaster, all of those are just 8x8 posts, 2 posts sitting side by side. So that would be mine. I would stay consistent with the current branding we have. Keep Ontario's Celtic Heartland in the current font of option 1.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bingley. I think there's enough information in regards to what council is looking for. I think option 1 style is what we're looking for. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, that is great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And I think there's another question or comment from Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief. Option 1, definitely for as far as the font. I have no problem with it saying Ontario's Celtic Heartland as well as where Ontario began. I don't think they contradict each other. I think they're just a fact. And as far as the South Glengarry on there as well, bring it back so we can have a look at it, because if it gets too busy, it's going to be hard to read even at 50 kilometers an hour.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Thanks very much, Ms. Bingley, for your presentation. We look forward to seeing one of the new signs that they're going to redesign for us.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Request for funding, Glengarry County Archives, Mr. McDonald.
Hello, thank you. So this is page 58 of your staff report. Sorry, I should say thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reading through it, we know that the request was for $21,000 for a loan. We approved that last council meeting. This is a $26,000 for non-repayable funding. Scrolling down to point number 8, you can kind of summarize the project. I summarized as the initial ask of $140,000. There was a contingency given, I believe Deputy Mayor Warden asked to have it in the budget, so we have that there. And then the requests, I'll bring your attention point number 13, just as the possible negatives to the project, but otherwise I think council has talked about it. In addition to the shortfall on point number 12, some of it was because of Ontario Building Code. Much like we know from several of our experiences, it costs a little bit more to build for a municipal building, and building code is always changing. They also didn't get money from the federal government as well as the STNG regional project. Otherwise, the report is as it is, and I'll leave it to council for conversation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. I can assure you that having a conversation with a few of the board members that fundraising will definitely continue, and if there's a surplus once the building is complete, that those funds would either be reimbursed back to the municipality to offset the funding request that they're asking for this evening. And secondly, I mean, we all have to appreciate and realize that fundraising kind of stopped probably as of March 14th once COVID-19 came into play, so that held any fundraisers for any activity or any group that's out there. So that's kind of where they're at now in regards to looking for the funding request. If they did have fundraisers out there, I don't think they'd be at the table here this evening. So Deputy Mayor Warden, then I believe Martin, Councillor Lang.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Although this was unexpected, I think that as Councillor Lang stated at our last meeting, we can't leave them hanging. The project is just about finished. And we were all in that building back in February, which seems like years ago. And I think I was by the building the other day, and the exterior of that building just looks, it's shining. So I'm fully in supportive of this. I can speak to, as being on the committee with Councillor McDonnell, there's been a real hard push funding, and we all know why our goals came short. So I hope my colleagues will rally and support this last little bit of funding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Yes, and I'm going to stick with what I had said last time. I want to see this project finished. I know sometimes things go a little over budget, but I think we've got a great group here that are working hard. I think they would have likely came a lot closer to their goal if COVID-19 hadn't hit. And I think they will continue to work. I don't think they will just drop this if we give them the money to finish this up. But we've got to finish this project. You can't leave it that close to the finish line and not get over. So thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Jaworski, and then Councillor McDonnell.
Yeah, certainly this is an amazing project, and those who have been spearheading it, they've done an amazing job that we'll all be very proud of. They should be very proud of for many years to come. However, I get one thing that sort of concerns me in this case is, I mean, and Mr. McDonald refers to this in the staff report, is that this is going to be an issue for pretty much every charitable organization, that they will not have been able to continue with fundraising because of COVID-19 restrictions. And and perhaps someone can clarify this for me. My understand, like I would assume that the opening of this building is going to be delayed, certainly to the public. So I suppose where I'm going with this is, what's the rush in terms of having like to get this finished, or what is the rush to getting this and putting it through right now versus sort of many projects are slowing down and can be completed sort of in a bit slower fashion, so that that more lines up with when the building can actually open to the public. So maybe if someone could clarify a bit more about like what are the negatives to allowing it going a bit more slowly.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Deputy Mayor Warden to start, and if there's anything, I'll jump in at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I understand your concerns, Councillor Jaworski, I mean, we're almost finished this project. We will be, yes, you are correct that we are, not able to open it to the public for the foreseeable future. However, if the project gets finished, then we can vacate the public school and cease the lease that we will be paying them. They've already agreed to let us go from any remainder of the lease. So technically, we won't be paying for two buildings. So right now we are paying for a lease at the public school, and we are paying for the maintenance and the utilities on this now North Glengarry and South Glengarry owned building. So the sooner that we can get our archives situated in the building, albeit not open to the public, then the costs associated with occupying the leased area at the high school will be gone, and therefore we'll be under our own roof and we won't have those expenses. So I think it's imperative that we move forward, get this done as soon as possible, and then we don't have to pay the Upper Canada District Board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was going to comment the same in regards to paying bills on excuse me, in two different buildings. So the faster we can get out of the school, I think it'd be the cheaper in the long run. So Councillor Jaworski.
Well, just a point of clarification. My recollection was that the annual lease, our portion was $10,000. So it is a fairly small amount from what I recall. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But
that for the school you're talking about, or the new one?
Yes, for the school. Yeah.
Mr. McDonald, do you have that number?
It's 10,000 from each municipality for a total of 20,000. So it'll be 10,000 savings for us as well as North Glengarry. If I'm correct, I believe I am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McDonald?
I was going to say, I know our portion is close to 10,000, so that's accurate. And Deputy Mayor Warden does sit on the board, so that does sound right too.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I reserve the right to be wrong on that statement.
Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have no issue giving this amount of money at this point. I do think there will be savings if we give it now, and I understand Mr. Jaworski's reserves, I guess, on pushing on what feels like a big rush on the project and trying to finish it, when yes, there are other organizations that are going to be facing challenges as well with lack of fundraising. But I will just say that yes, there's the savings in the lease. There's also the savings of you've got your contractor now who's working. He's going to be there. If the money stops, he's going somewhere else, and his return may be prolonged up to 6-7 months. And then we are looking at paying another year's cost in rent, just in keeping our archive safe. I would also just like to say that I mean, I haven't been with this group near as long as Deputy Mayor Warden and some of the initial people that were involved in the creation of the archives, but they are a very determined group, and there isn't a doubt in my mind that the municipality there's a very good chance we'll see a transfer coming back for some of this money that was unexpectedly unbudgeted for. So I have a lot of confidence in them.
Okay, thank you. And I think we all do, Councillor McDonnell. We've seen the work that they are doing over the short period of time and the fundraising that they did raise. We compliment each and every one of them for the hard work that they're doing there, for sure. I have a motion moved by Councillor Jaworski, second by Mark Lang. Be resolved that staff report 65-2020 be received, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry direct administration to fund $26,000 to the Glengarry County Archives capital campaign from the general reserves. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to number 4, civic addressing bylaw of 24-2020. Mr. Coupart.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you very much. I'm back here tonight after the first and second reading of the civic addressing bylaw on March 4th, where Council gave direction to remove the administration fees from the fee schedule. That has been done, as you could see on the new bylaw, and that's really about it. That 15% is gone. So the actual costs you see are our costs as of today to buy those signs and posts.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coupart. To my understanding, there was no other changes. It was just the one in regards to the fees.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from members of council? Not seeing none. I have a motion moved by Sam McDonnell, second by Lyle Warden. Be resolved that staff report number 66-2020 be received and that bylaw 24-2020, being a bylaw to regulate civic addresses in the Township of South Glengarry, be read a third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this 19th day of May 2020. And furthermore, that bylaw 21-05 be amended, be rescinded. Heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Coupart.
Thank you.
Number 5, waste collection contracts. Mr. McDonald.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. This report deals with our waste management contracts, the current contracts for household waste collection and for recycling collection come to their terminal, the end of those contracts at November of 2020. With the circumstances around the regulations to change the recycling program in the province of Ontario and transition in somewhere between the years of 2023 and 2025. And without having those regulations released by the province, that along with the study that's being done through the United Counties of SDNG with the municipalities within SDNG on a waste strategy that was awarded to a company in April, DFA Infrastructure. That report that they will be doing on the waste management study from a regional perspective includes a fairly broad scope, which is outlined in the analysis of the staff report. I won't go through it in detail, but it is very much a full comprehensive review of waste management practices in SDNG and where we could potentially find efficiencies and collaboration. So with those two issues still working through those processes, Council had suggested that we approach our current contractors to see if they would entertain the possibility of a 1-year extension. And I'm pleased to report that both of our contractors have agreed to the 1-year extension. This will allow us additional time to review the study report that's coming next March. It'll also allow the municipality to review the regulations on the transition of the Blue Box program to what they call the circular economy or the extended producer responsibility model. So without those studies and regulations in place, it makes it very difficult to determine what type of contract we would like to put out. So the extension from administrative review makes a lot of sense, and we are recommending that Council approve the extension and authorize that we move to that 1-year period of time for those two contracts, one for the collection of household waste, the second for the collection of recycling.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Deputy Mayor Warden.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I understand the counties is doing their review, and we've got some initial timelines. Ms. McDonald, would there be a possibility to add in like a 6-month renewal if we need extra time so that we don't have to renegotiate. I believe, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology. So let's just say that we renew for 1 year with the option of extending, because we don't know if we don't even know at this point if 1 year will be enough. Is it a possibility to maybe request like an extension without like an increased rate or something like that? Is that possible?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is possible. I'm not entirely sure that it's necessary in this case. I'm fairly confident that the report in March will be completed, and we should have the regulations by summer, fall of this year on the recycling program. So I believe there's likely sufficient time to review those contracts and have them renewed as of December of next year. That being said, though, if council wishes, we can certainly put an option in there for a 6-month extension beyond the 1 year. That's not a problem, and it falls certainly within our procurement policy conditions.
Just subsequent, Mr. Mayor, I don't know. I just feel like we've already extended this contract with our garbage a year, and here we are, like literally a year later. We didn't approve, it's this meeting a year ago that we did not approve the contract for the new guys. And it just seems like yesterday that we were at that meeting. So I'm just wondering if my colleagues agree with maybe adding some sort of a extension if needed in this renewal. And it'll just potentially give us some guidelines, because let's say we decide to take garbage in-house, well, then we have to order trucks. Like there's all kinds of variations that could potentially leave us holding the line. So I'm wondering what my council colleagues think.
Okay, thank you. I do agree with Deputy Mayor Warren in respect that 1 year goes by very quickly. And if for whatever reason we don't get it completed, then we're going back to renegotiate again. So if we can ask for at least a 6 month, I'd be happy with that also. Is there any other thoughts or questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Lang and then Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I'm okay with the 6 month if they're willing to do it. I did have a question, and just for my own interest on line 12 under the impact on the budget. It just said that the recycling collection at $345 a ton, and they want to put it up from $319 a ton. And just for my own interest, I'm trying to remember when we had done the thing with the Cornwall plant there. That was at $301 a ton. So are we paying a total of $650 a ton for our recycling?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
It seems like an awful lot, and it's the first time I've seen the two numbers specifically and put them together in my head, but it's costing us a lot to do recycling at $650 a ton.
That's why when we get this report back from the counties, I hope we get a report back where it's recycling is more, I guess, across the county side, and that our costs can be a lot cheaper than what they are today. But I agree, they're very expensive. Councillor Jaworski and then Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for your staff report. While I agree with Deputy Mayor Warden that time flies, I guess I would like us to be following the SDGs, this report very closely. I know that it's going to be phased, that there's going to be reports to County Council over the period of, so that we shouldn't be blindsided by the results when they come in March. So I would prefer that we stay very close to it, and then we have 6 months of planning on where we want to be. I feel like we just keep pushing out how we're dealing with waste and recycling. I know a lot of this is outside of our control, particularly when it comes to the province, and how we're still waiting for the regulations around the Blue Box program. But still, I would like us to have some urgency on it, and I feel that if we already have the 6 month extension embedded in it, I foresee we'll be using that. So I would rather there be some urgency in trying to work to an earlier deadline.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess my comment to it is I would like to see an extension put on, as Deputy Mayor Warden and everyone else has said. It time flies very quickly. We could be back here in a year and think it was last month. I'm in favor of trying to follow this as close as possible, but at the end of the day, for me, recycling costs us a fortune at this point, and whatever the cheapest option is going to get my vote. So I really, if the counties tell us to do one thing, but it's going to cost us more at $6.50 a ton of recycling, I'm going to go with the cheapest option.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, just a point of clarification on the cost. We do receive some funding from the province to offset those costs. I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but it isn't entirely subsidized or paid through the property tax base.
Okay, Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. One thing I just, being the chair of the Landfill Environment Committee, I wanted to bring up a point that, you know, our committee was tasked by council to provide feedback on the 2012 South Glengarry waste recycling strategy and provide recommendations. And because of all these other things that are happening around, it's a bit difficult for the committee to, you know, provide feedback at this current stage. I think it would be more efficient for the committee to wait for some of this information coming back from the counties. I mean, there are certain elements we can still make recommendations on, but I think the bulk really would have to wait for some of this other work to be done. So since our committee really only works at the request of council, you know, I wanted to bring up the idea, perhaps for, you know, council's consideration, that perhaps our committee in the meantime, since we do have some members who are very active and very enthusiastic, if, you know, perhaps we could, you know, branch a bit wider and look at issues of, you know, improving energy efficiency within the township's operations, as well as, you know, reducing waste that is created internally by the township, and how, you know, how the township itself manages its waste and recycling.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other comments or questions? Not hearing none. I do have a revised motion I'll read. A motion moved by Martin Lang and by Sam McDonald. Be resolved that staff report 67-2020 be received and that the council approves the 1-year extension for the household waste collection with HGC Management and for the recycling collection with Coco Group, and furthermore that a request be made for an additional 6-month extension if needed, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign any relevant documents. So that was a revised that was asked for. So you heard the motion. All in favor of the motion? The motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Okay, and number 6 is the Public Works Facility Plans. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a report just to provide council with an update on the status of the plans. As council is aware, a new public works facility was budgeted for in 2020, and council had provided direction to administration to proceed with the preparation of the drawings and tender documents. So what you have attached or appended to the report this evening is the architectural plans and the site plan in just the draft form. And the mechanical and electrical plans and the finalized tender documents will be forthcoming at some point within the next month to allow us time to put the package together entirely. So this is just to provide council with an overview of the floor plan that we're looking at for the building, and also with where it would be situated on the site at Airport Road. It was discussed and recommended through the review of the counties that we might wish to consider having a larger building at some point in the future, or now for that matter, to accommodate the deployment of all of our resources out of the one site. And we have ensured that in the plans we have the capacity to do that. But at current time, the cost of an additional 2-bay addition was estimated to be at $300,000. So I would recommend that we leave this as a future consideration for the additional space. And at such time as when we require that area, if we do, we can build onto the building without having to change any of the electrical, change any of the mechanical, and change any of the structural. It would just simply be an addition to the building. There was also a kind of an occurring parallel to this study or tender process. There was a recommendation that an RFP be issued for a route optimization study. It was included in our modernization funding plan for this year. The recommendation was to do the route optimization study at some point in the future when the North Lancaster facility was nearing the end of its useful service life. However, council wished to advance that study, and the RFP has been published and issued as of last week, and it closes on June 4th. So the plans are there for your review, and if you have certainly any questions, I'm more than prepared to answer.
Okay, thank you very much for your report. I'll go to Councillor Lang and then Deputy Mayor Warden.
Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald, for the presentation and for giving us the plans to go over and look at. I think you're right. I think it looks like you've put some thought into the fact that the electric room and so forth is big enough that we can put an extension at any time. And that type of building, I think, is relatively easy to extend onto those I-beam type frame buildings. And it shouldn't be a problem to do in the future if it needs to be done. And it looks like you also have situated the fuel tanks and so forth far enough away that you could extend. So I did have a couple of, or at least one question and maybe a comment. Question was that it just seemed odd, but it only showed up on the, it doesn't show up in the overall picture, but on the plans it says, looks like bay 14 is only 14 feet wide. The door is 14, all the rest of the doors are 16. Just not sure why we put a 14-foot door in for bay number 4 rather than a 16-foot. And maybe it has something to do with the pit. I'm not sure it's in the same one.
Mr. McDonald?
I'll note that comment and I'll review that.
All right, and then the other part was just looking at the layout of the office space and the washrooms and so forth. And just a thought I had, and I'm not going to be the one working there, but I've gone into the other township garage a few times. This one, when you go in the door that would person would come in if they were to come to look for the road manager or anybody in there, they're going to come in and there's going to be a hall going to the right and left kind of thing, or one straight ahead and one to the left. And then there's a big block of the washrooms and a janitor's room. And then there's the boardroom, and then there's the office. So the office is kind of stuck into the stock room. It's quite a ways from where you would come in the door. I don't think you're going to be able to find anybody. And if I was working in that office, I think, you know, as a roads manager, I would want my office in that corner where you first come in. So I would have a window to see the yard, to see if trucks are coming and going and what people are doing in the yard, and maybe even a window into the bays so that you could see what the guys were doing out in the bay. And that's just a thought of myself. If I was to be working out of that office, I would want an office with a window, at least be able to see something rather than being in the center of the stock room. So just something to think about. I don't know if you guys are interested in doing that. I'm not going to be working there. But anyway, that's my comments. Thank you.
I agree 100%, Councillor Lang. That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing it up. Mr. McDonald, if you can look at that.
Yeah, duly noted, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor Warden?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report. You know, I did find it a little difficult to, I'm not an engineer, so, and I do have some concerns. Namely, I think, like, we've agreed to go ahead with the building, but I would like to put an emphasis on getting that optimization study done before, you know, the building is fully completed, because if the optimization route comes back and states that our best opportunity is to run under one building, well, if we're building it now, let's build it as one unit. And I don't see what type of heating. I'm very concerned that, you know, it needs to be in-floor heating. If we're building a shop today, with the health and safety of people working on equipment and being on the ground. The heating system has to be integrated into the floor. So it's missing some stuff that I'd like to maybe sit down with you and go over before we issue the RFP. This is going to be our facility for quite some time, and I want to hopefully be able to do it correct. So I'm hoping we can get this optimization route done as soon as possible. Another question that I had, and I doubt that you'll be able to answer it, is I noticed that on the side for the accessibility, it shows like a ramp. And I'm just curious as to why we couldn't make the landscape, go up to that door as opposed to paying for cement. I believe granular B gravel and A gravel mounded up to make, I know there's got to be certain slopes. I think it would be more cost effective for this door. I don't even know where it technically would be on the building, but that was just something that caught my eye, and I totally concur with what Councillor Lang stated. I mean, if somebody's walking in there from the public, the offices should be at the front, and then the other stuff at the back. So I'm not an engineer, but I've being formerly in the fuel business, I've been in many shops over the years with equipment, and I'd like to see where the bulk storage of motor oil, DEF fluid is going to be stored, and also if there's an opportunity to potentially have dual zones, or tri-zones. So, maybe the area where a potential mechanic would be working could be, 7 degrees warmer, but the trucks further down the line don't have to be kept at the same temperature. The technology is there for that. So I'd like to really hunker down on the efficiency of the building. I think it's a great opportunity now, and I think that every dollar invested in a higher efficient building will net savings for our residents for the years to come. I know that was a lot, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McDonald, did you have any comments towards that?
Yeah, just a couple of brief comments. I'll note these thoughts and comments from council and follow up with the designers. It should be noted that the mechanical and electrical plans have not been completed, and that's why we don't see the specifics about the HVAC systems at this point. That would be the next step, is to, with the floor plan finalized, we can move forward to complete the designs for the HVAC systems. Obviously, radiant heating radiant floor heating would be a preferred option. We did, in a couple of contracts, put it in the tender as provisional item, just to ensure that we can make the item fit into the budget as well. But I'm certainly supportive of Deputy Mayor Warden's comments about trying to find as much efficiencies and energy. And I know I've had some discussions with Councillor Jaworski on the building over the last weeks, and those efficiencies. We do have to meet certain energy efficiency requirements under the Ontario Building Code, but there's also potential to do more than that. So those are the types of things we'll look at. The RFP for the route optimization closes on June 4th. So at that point, we'll know what the schedule would be for the completion of the report. It was the previous direction of council that we issued the tender, and that the RFP would be done at some point at a later date. If council wishes that be completed before we do this building, that's your direction. My only caveat there or concern would be, it would be unlikely that we would be able to start the building this year, or certainly would not be able to finish the building this year. We might be able to get started in the fall. But again, that's the direction of council, and if you wish to push that off, that's a decision council needs to provide direction on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have a couple of questions in regards to, especially number 7, where there will also be costs associated with site works to expand the granular yard and bring services to the building, plus the existing fuel system in Williamstown. So that's on top of the 1.245, obviously. Do we have any rough numbers of what that's going to cost us? And the second part to that question would be is, what other furniture or equipment are we going to be looking at to purchase to bring into the new building once it's completed?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the estimated cost for the site works, we haven't crunched those numbers entirely yet, but we are planning just to relocate the existing fuel system in Williamstown. We're planning to move all of the tools from Williamstown to the new facility, all of the office furnishings to the new facility. The furnishings for the kitchen, which is listed as the boardroom, but it'll actually be the kitchen. We'll do our own cabinetry work, very basic cabinetry that we'll buy prefab. So I don't imagine that the site works would cost us any more than another $100,000. So we're still, although we're close, we're still within that $1.32 million budget.
Do we have any estimated cost in regards of moving the fuel system from Williamstown to Airport Road?
Not at this time. I don't have the cost to do that.
Because I mean, we budgeted 1.32, and I don't
Yes.
think we're going to be coming in at 1.32 or under, to be honest. But we need to start getting some hard costs in regards to all the extra costs in respect to what it's going to cost to have this building totally complete. Because, you know, I appreciated looking at it after and saying, you know, we're going to go out and buy cupboards or build cupboards or do whatever, but there's still a cost to all that. So I think we need to know what the cost of this total contract is going to be, or the total cost so when we unlock that door and the door is completely, or the garage is completely open. I would like to know what those total costs would be.
Yeah, thank you. I will start working on those site work numbers, because that's something we're going to do a fair bit of that work ourselves, or just with smaller contracts. It's not going to be part of the general contract.
Okay, thank you. It's just we need to, again, I think we're going to be over the 1.3, so we have to figure out if we are over that number at the end of the day, where those dollars are going to come from, and if we can afford to even start it in 2020, or if we have to postpone to 2021. But we'll wait for those numbers hopefully in the near future. I think Councillor Jaworski had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for your report. Couple of comments. With respect to the route optimization, I completely and I strongly believe that, you know, we should have that done prior to finalizing the building design. And, you know, piggybacking on what our mayor has just said, you know, we need to have a very clear picture on what the total cost is going to be on that building. Although I believe that if, you know, route optimization shows that one location is ideal, I mean, there is a limit to which, you know, like how much extra money that could cost that I would be supportive of. And I think we need to have a clearer picture of what that is prior to going further down this path. With regards to the design of the building itself, you know, things that are very important to me are energy efficiency of the building, as well as making it a very functional place for our vehicles to be maintained. And so I know, I mean, this is a discussion we've had, is, you know, in the world that I work in, the maintenance shops, the bays that would be drive-through are the ones that are doing maintenance. And then if it's really more of a parking facility, those areas are not drive-through bays. And while I understand it's very convenient to have drive-through bays, and it allows to have very rapid departure from the building, I don't know if that's really necessary, and I don't know if it's really worthwhile considering the additional cost of the doors and the additional loss in heat from the building. I mean, my understanding is our current buildings now, I mean, Williamstown has a wall down the middle, so if I'm correct, there's not a drive-through there. And then when it comes to North Lancaster, you know, there's 2 doors on one side and 5 on the other, so there'd be a number that are also not drive-through bays. So again, I think that's something to you know, really think about whether or not that's really necessary for the convenience, or whether we could use that money in other ways to make it a more functional, I mean, you know, in terms of maintenance for the equipment. You know, and again, coming back to the, you know, what the mechanic will be doing there, I want to ensure that they're, you know, fully equipped in terms of what they need to be able to do the maintenance, in terms of, you know, like a crane or a lift to be able to do maintenance on or remove parts, etc. Again, in terms of a wash bay, what we can do in terms of having a very, I mean, I'm not necessarily suggesting we need to go to an automated wash bay, but again, some things that are make cleaning of the equipment very quick, and so that maintenance can be done on it rapidly, as well as cleaning it before they're parked as well. So those are, again, things that are very important. So as Deputy Mayor Warden has mentioned already, what kind of heating does this building have? Again, in terms of looking at energy efficiency, obviously the area where the mechanics doing their work, that should be most heated. But the other areas that are essentially just parking stalls, I don't, is it necessary for them to be heated as much? I think, and again, echoing what Deputy Mayor Warden has mentioned in terms of, what's the setup in terms of fluids for maintenance and consumables such as DEF, the diesel exhaust fluid, to ensure that, those can be stored in bulk inside, and, be able to take advantage of, prices that are, particularly for DEF, being able to buy that in bulk is significantly cheaper than if you're buying it in smaller packages. So I don't feel I have enough information right now on this building to be able to say that we should be issuing a tender or moving forward and spending money on it. I certainly want the route optimization done first.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. A question for you in respect to what Councillor Jaworski just mentioned in regards to the optimization study. How long would that take, or do we have an estimated time?
I didn't put any specific time frame in the RFP. When the submissions come back on June 4th, we'll have a better idea of what that timing will be from the consultants that provide submissions.
Okay, so I mean, our next council meeting, did you say July 4th?
June 4th is the closing date.
So it's after our first council meeting in June.
Correct.
So then that report won't come to council till late June. So as we keep pushing off, is we're not going to see this building being built in 2020, obviously, if we're going to wait for these reports to come in. It sounds like to me. Councillor McDonnell, then Deputy Mayor Warden.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to, I guess, echo a few things that were said and a few new concerns to me. I know Deputy Mayor or Councillor Lang had mentioned the office. That was one thing that had struck me right away. The office does seem kind of out of place. I know where I work, we have a lot of cameras around. We can watch the entire yard from every office and different control room we have, which is a great asset. So that I would encourage putting a camera system in, whether it's just watching the front entrance, the back doors, and the two views of the yard. The cost, again, for myself, I'm not concerned we are going to come under budget, or really, for that matter, close enough to budget for my comfort. I would like to see the cost dropped. I agree with Councillor Jaworski. I see absolutely no reason for 6 drive-through bays. I think that's a luxury, and that's a luxury I don't think we can really afford. Route optimization, I was under the impression that was going to be done before we even went to RFP, and I personally think we're far from RFP at this point. And I mean, I could go on and echo everybody else, but I don't think I have many other new comments. I'd like to see 2 maintenance bays maybe that are segregated, that can be heated, separate from the rest of the building. I think most of the work's going to be done summer and fall and winter, and a bit in the spring. So that'll be cost savings will be best on the heat. And that 14 bay door at the end, I did see that, which is I found a little odd, but I thought it might be for pickup truck maintenance and things such as that. But something I'd welcome further information on. But other than that, no, I'm not ready to move forward with it, and I think we have a little bit more work to do yet. You're muted, Frank.
Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. We'll go to Deputy Mayor Warden, and then we'll wrap that up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've had a great discussion tonight. I'm fully in support of moving forward with this garage. I just think that I think we need to get it right, and I would if it means that we're not able to get into it this fall, we currently have two functioning municipal buildings that are currently suiting us just fine. I'd rather defer it if it had to be deferred to get this optimization study in with proper information and to see where what size of a building we need, and take our time with the design of it. I appreciate Councillor Jaworski's comments into regards to some of the design and the functions of the building, and Councillor McDonnell's idea of having different climate zones. I think that's something that should be seriously considered. So while I believe council is all in favor of this building, I think we just want to kind of get it right. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lang.
Sorry, I know you wanted to cut it off, but just to be brief, as far as the drive-through bays, unless you're going to put 2 trucks in a bay, you're going to have the same number of overhead doors. If you could make the building long and narrow and they're not drive-through, you're still going to have the same number. So unless you're going to put 2 trucks in and then have to back one out to get the other one out, you're not going to save anything. So that's my thought.
I think that's what Councillor McDonnell and Councillor Jaworski was looking at, is back-to-back, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But I kind of have an issue with that myself, only respect if you want the front truck out, then you got to get the back one out to get the front one out. So your garage doors being open longer or twice, if that's the case.
Then you're kind of defeating your purpose of saying we want this building to be a great building for the next 40 years. We want floor heating, we want this and that, and then you're going to cut corners on the overhead doors. I think you're contradicting yourself.
I agree, Councillor Lang. Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess my concern with the overhead doors is in 30 years, when the building's 10 years or 40 years even at that point, you're getting later in the lifespan. Those doors are going to have to be replaced, and as they get older, they just become a natural heat loss. So that's my concern on the on essentially 3-4 extra doors. I expect to be parking 2 in one bay. But that's...
Well, I think the opportunity is, if this is a brand new building, that over the next 20, 30 years, that the building is being maintained on a regular basis. And if there's a door that's not functioning properly or whatever, that would be replaced instead of replacing several doors at one time. But, Councillor Jaworski.
I'll be very brief, just to the point that was raised about like being consistent. Heat loss through like a drive-through that's open at both ends is much more dramatic than if you had one door open even for twice the amount of time. The heat loss through drive-throughs is dramatic. And I did mean that that one truck would have to back in and then the other truck would back in front of it. And I realize that there will be there probably would be some situations where you might want one out and not the other. But I mean, generally when it comes to the fleet of plows, they're generally leaving at the same time.
No, I appreciate your comments, but I think what we have to appreciate too is you're not going to have both doors open at the same time. If you're driving in, you're going to have the one door open, and as you're leaving the following day, then you're going to have the other door open to get out. So I don't see where both doors at both ends are going to be open at the same time. I think for safety purposes, both vehicles are pulling in instead of backing into each other. So I'm going to push for bays on both garage doors on both ends, but that's council's decision. I see Councillor Lang is in favor of that also. Deputy Mayor Warden.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I mean, there's no reason why they can't back in. It's not a health and safety concern. There's backup beepers on the trucks, and if a driver is not competent enough to back a truck in, he shouldn't be driving it forward. So I'm fine with the bays on both sides, but there's no reason why the trucks can't back in and drive out. And if to alleviate potentially, like Councillor Jaworski says, both doors being open at the same time. But I mean, it's tomato. So thank you.
Well, I guess we have to appreciate that we need to look at the future, and the way the future is going. In another 10 years, we won't have drivers, so it'll be just the trucks. So, Councillor McDonnell.
It's okay. My point's been made.
Okay. Mr. McDonald, do you have enough information in respect of what council is looking for in the future?
I believe so.
All right. Appreciate very much for your report. I do have a motion moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Lyle Warden. Be resolved that staff report 68-2020 be received and that the council of the Township of South Glengarry file this report. I'm suggesting that we postpone or, what was the other word? Postpone this until another meeting, probably at late June or early July. Deputy Mayor Warden.
I just want to make sure the language is properly in what we're directing staff to do so that there's not a misconception here. We need to make sure that staff is given clear direction. The staff report is pretty general and it's received, but council, I believe, wants staff to proceed 100% with the route optimization, and before the building is completed, design, RFP, et cetera, we have that route optimization and we make our design based off of that. I think I'm correct.
I think what we'll do, Deputy Mayor Warren, instead of doing another motion, maybe we'll just add that to our outstanding work, and then we'll have it some dates in regards to when those things have to be completed.
I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that staff have clear direction so that there's not a misunderstanding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I am not in favor of waiting for the optimization study. I am in favor of doing it, same as we had decided last meeting. We had said we were going to do it, but we were not. I don't see how it's going to change the design of the building unless you're just deciding to put those extra bays on, which I don't think we have the money for at the moment. So even if the study came back and said we should go to one garage, we don't have to do it this year. We have a garage in North Lancaster that's fully functional. So I'm in favor of moving ahead with this building. Part of my thing was I wanted to see things happening this year where we could put some, money that we have sitting in the bank account doing nothing. I'm going to be locked on this collecting a bit of interest, but get that money out, get it spent in the community, get things moving. That was kind of what we had decided. We've decided we're going to build it. I want the study done, but I don't think it's going to change the fact that that building's going to end up getting built there. I do want the building to be built properly and want to make sure we have a design that we're all happy with. But I don't think the study, the optimization study, needs to be done ahead of time. That's my personal opinion. Thanks.
No, I agree. Thank you very much. I think what we're going to do is wait probably till June 4th, I guess, until we get that RFP back in respect of how long that study is going to take. And the second part of it is once we get back the redesign of the new building, then we can make decisions in regards to moving forward, either with both at the same time or at least start getting the building going and have the study done during that period of time, or whatever council wants to do at that point. But I think we need to wait till those reports come back, probably the late June meeting. Okay, so we're going to defer or I'm recommending that we defer the motion. So if all in favor of that motion to defer till a later date. Motion's carried. Thank you. I have a motion moved by Martin Lang, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry accepts the items presented on the agenda as committee reports and for information purposes only. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. And we'll go to number 8, unfinished business. Docks of the Township property. Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We met on site with the surveyors last week. They started to mark out the lot lines for the parcels that will be created. They'll be preparing a draft plan that I'll be bringing to council for their review before we finalize and register the plan and start the negotiations with the adjacent property owners.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. Just living in that area, I had an opportunity to walk it a few times, and the one to the east, I guess, the furthest east. I'm not sure if the pins are in the proper place, but I don't know if Gary can look at that or if you can look at that sometime this week before it gets finalized.
And I can do that.
I can show you exactly what I'm looking at, but maybe I'm wrong.
I can do that, and you bring up a good point, Mr. Mayor. The flags that are there are just reflective of where the property lines would be. So if any member of council is down around by Glen Walter and you want to just take a visual look of where the lines are proposed to be, as opposed to looking at it on a plan, that is something you can do now.
Yeah, we'd have to do that now only based on, they should have everything finalized probably within a week or so. So, Mr. McDonald, whenever you're meeting down there, maybe you can let me know and I can show you the pins that I'm looking at. And like I said, maybe I'm not looking at the big ones. But, Deputy Mayor Warden?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do apologize. I wanted to acknowledge the chief's report in the information only section. We kind of had a one meeting roll into the other. I would have liked that to have been pulled. Can we have that back on the agenda for next meeting? Because I would like to discuss a few things on it with the chief. I forgot to ask it to be pulled out tonight. I apologize. We had the committee of adjustment meeting roll right into this meeting, okay?
So you're asking for number 2, the fire department monthly update, is that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if you could bring that report back to our next council meeting.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, would you be okay with that being, we'll have the May report on the next meeting, so we could bring both.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. I had asked for this report, and then with that meeting, it slipped my mind to request to be brought out in discussion. That would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
And I did want to thank the chief for preparing this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2 is fire protection ponds.
No update on those. Waiting for response from the property owners to the north of the pond on a meeting.
Thank you. And municipal servicing from the city of Cornwall.
We have received a review from the third-party consultant. I'll be bringing that back. The review, I believe, one of the options I'd like to consider is have the steering committee that was created to review the Glen Walter Master Servicing Plan EA, that this could be added to their scope of work for the review. And we're just trying to nail down a meeting for that steering committee, perhaps as early as next Monday, if that would be a direction council would be supportive of.